So let's talk about these DEI executive orders. Of course,
Yeah.
it goes as far as the federal government, but we've already seen this with black scholarships being struck down,
Yeah.
the Fearless Fund being sued, which is a private organization that helped black women.
Yeah.
But this is important. So if you could go into a little bit of the history of DEI, because I try and tell people DEI didn't just start, 5, 6 years ago. DEI goes back to the 1960s, and this is not some brand new concoction because George Floyd was horrifically
Yeah. Yeah.
murdered. This has been, I mean, Nixon in many ways strengthened some DEI
He
efforts,
did.
right? I
He
mean,
did.
this is really this is an erasure of our history,
Of our history.
and people think that it's just came around recently because people find three words DEI, CRT, and then boom, this is
Yeah.
their thing. But explain what this means in the history of DEI.
No, Brother Clay, what you just said is really profound, right? Because when people want to erase your history, it is the first step on the road to erasing you,
Yeah.
right? And so we need to really be very clear that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in corporate America are linked right back to what Lyndon Johnson did in 1964 and 65 with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, right? So the goal was to end the legacy of racial segregation or Jim Crow. So we started calling these programs equal opportunity, anti-discrimination, or affirmative action programs. White corporate leaders didn't like that, right? They made them uncomfortable. Well, what do you mean? Like, we're not discriminating against, we just hire, the best people coming out of Harvard and Yale, right? The fact that Harvard and Yale were, sort of de facto racially segregated didn't matter, right? So we get to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs as it's practiced in corporate America because a bunch of women and black people on Wall Street started suing the pants off of companies in the 1980s. And we get to these programs through what are called consent decrees. Okay, we'll pay you a big settlement. We discriminated against you. We'll do the anti-discrimination work or the bias training, but let's call it something nicer: diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So with Trump and his friends DeSantis, what they have y'all doing now is running around chasing your tail about
Hmm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The real game is taking away all of your civil rights, because if they can get you debating diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're not watching has he ends equal opportunity, right? They're all the same thing. And what I've been trying, I'm probably one of the two or three leading DEI consultants through the 2040 strategy group in the country, right? So we serve a lot of Fortune 500 clients, a lot of Wall Street banks. The reality is, these programs are pretty popular in corporate America. They've come to be relied upon as really important for risk management. The fact that Trump is breaking them just goes to show how extreme they are in their white nationalist agenda. And we've all got to be astute to that. And I'll also say equity is enshrined in the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment requires equity. So if you're living in Florida or Texas or any of these states that have already banned equity, black folks, Latino, y'all need to be suing the pants off of these states under the 14th Amendment. No one can ban equity, but they've got you thinking they can do it. And so now
For
they're
folks
like,
who
oh,
don't know, explain what equity means. For folks who don't know.
equity means that all people will be given fair treatment by an organization in hiring, retention, promotions, etc. Fair treatment is enshrined in the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, right? And so if a state says they're going to ban equity, where is everybody suing that state saying you cannot ban equity in my college, in my kid's school district? The ACLU has fought the good fight. They've done some really great work in places like Florida and Texas, but they're underfunded. The rest of our groups need to get into the fight right now, right? And I don't see that happening. I didn't see it happening last year because people thought Harris was going to win. The reality is, where has the Democratic Party been since the affirmative action case in 2023? I haven't heard them stand up and loudly say, our legacy as Democrats runs back to Lyndon Johnson making a multiracial democracy. I've heard them saying, oh, well, maybe we should talk more to the rural people about what bothers them about these programs. Or, oh, well, maybe we are too woke. Maybe Harris, they've already given up on us, Black people. They've already given up on us. So again, I come out of that tradition, we're going to make a way out of no way. It's up to us. If you're waiting for the Democratic Party to save you, it is not going to happen. And I don't care if there's a black face at the top of the ticket, a black face heading the DNC. They have no tools because we have not make them develop them.
But can we say this, though? I agree with you. But if we would have had a Kamala Harris administration, this wouldn't have been perfect, but it would have been a pro-labor administration. We wouldn't have had this war on DEI. I do believe Kamala Harris would have been even more progressive than what she laid out on the campaign trail. If we would have showed up, we would have shown and flexed more of our power in the Democratic Party. I think about Jamal Bowman getting kicked out.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if Senator Warnock in Georgia is going to last, who has done some really great things, right? So it must be, I look to us as well, that the Democratic Party is not going to save us because too many of us are not saving ourselves by showing up and exercising our power like the folks before us did.
Yeah, I agree, Clay. I agree
so
to a
that's
point.
Kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah, it breaks mine too. But here's the problem with that, Clay. So President Biden was probably the most pro-black administration since
that's true.
Lyndon Johnson.
That's true.
All those black women judges, black vice president. He
Historic.
wrote the executive order making racial equity, the business of every federal branch agency.
Yep.
But what I'm saying is neither Biden nor Harris nor the Democratic leaders did enough after that affirmative action case at Harvard. They didn't pitch a fit. They didn't stand up. They didn't do what Republicans always do. Republicans say, well, maybe we can't overturn birthright citizenship, but we're going to try. We're going to say it should be overturned. The Democrats didn't say nobody should be ending affirmative action because they're afraid that those great white giant swing voters that live out in the mountains of Pennsylvania are going to vote against them, even though we don't need those people. We've got a base of 45% liberal progressive whites who get the issues, who will vote Democrat. We hypermobilize black and brown communities, we win. We didn't hypermobilize black and brown communities because they never stood up to vocally disagree with what was happening. And that's part of why they lost.
Do you think, Dr. Tillery, do you think that if they would have hammered more in on affirmative action, that all those people, do you think that would have shifted the voter turnout? I really think it was a misogyny thing. Did you read that article in Slate talking about how Kamala Harris, how no world leader would shake her hand? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and we could chop this up, and this is
right. No, Clay.
I feel like she was doomed.
Yeah, I feel like she was right.
Doomed.
Biden
mistakes were made. Mistakes were made, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Biden would have lost by more. That's pretty clear in the polling, right? What I'm saying is misogyny matters, but that's not what decided the vote in our community. And again, our community, there were enough votes to win. What decided the vote in our community is they were not progressive enough. Black people, and you hear this, Clay, well, what have the Democrats done for us lately? How have they defended us? That's what cost her. And we know it wasn't misogyny with black men overwhelmingly because her vote scores, her share with black men grew the closer we got to the election. So that meant the
non-voter.
When she finally started talking to our issues, it was working, right? But forget that. Kamala's gone.
That's water to the bridge
for a while. What we need to be focused on now is what is the Democratic National Committee is running an election right now. Are they talking about, are the leading candidates, Ben Wickler and Martin and all, are they talking about these issues? Are they talking about what racial equality agenda they're going to put in place? Here, a lot of talk about running a campaign everywhere, talking to the rural folks.
But one more thing, I'm confused. So if we admit that President Joe Biden was the most pro-black president that we've seen,
Yeah.
then why in the world would how come that wouldn't incentivize people? I'm of the belief now, I don't think folks care about policy. You and I might care about it, but if he did, I mean, there were some great wins: the infrastructure bill, student loan relief, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. I mean, the black unemployment nosedived right after it was 4 years ago. It was over the top. I mean, there all those executive orders around racial justice. I mean, if he was the most pro-black, then you would think that Biden and then Kamala Harris would have the highest black voter turnout we've ever seen if he did all those policy points.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say, Clay, is most of those are not policy wins. They're symbolic achievements. So appointing the judges, that doesn't play down with the black voters, right? Infrastructure bill has not yet been felt in black communities.
Right, that'll take time, yeah.
That takes time, right? Executive orders saying every federal branch agency now has to have a DEI officer and a plan for racial equity. That's huge for the black people in the middle class that are already going to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And so what was missing is that vocal pushback on the white supremacy that is extant in the Republican Party. And that's what would have made a difference. That's what my polling shows would have made a difference. And then also spending the money targeting black people. Like you said, mistakes were made. They did not do that because they didn't see generational change that the Alliance for Black Equality and my firm had been pointing to for 10 months. And now we know it's there. And what I'm saying is, what are the Democrats doing now to get those young brothers in our neighborhoods to say, okay, I see.
They're not doing anything now. They're done.
They're done.
They're going to go. They're going to the. We were saying this last time. The 1990s Democrats.
That's right.
They're looking for Bill Clinton Democrats.
That's right.
They're done.
And that's
they're
bad
done,
for
and
us.
That's terrible for us.
Yep.
And they're also done with what they believe to be unreliable voting blocks.
Yes.
Right. So they're done.
Yes.
So that's scary. So I've been saying we got to focus locally.
Yes.
What do you think is going to wake people up in our community? Because we have elections this year. We obviously have elections next year. There are some firebrand candidates running. There are some really important folks running. Yes. But what do you think is going to take for, because the Democratic Party is not going to come to, I mean, locally, some folks are going to try their best. But, the majority of us live in red states. Yes. So what do you think anything that's coming down is going to be a red alarm that folks are going to say, oh, wait a minute, we're going to show up and show out?
So what we're shifting the Alliance to Black Equality Super PAC to is exactly what you're talking about. Putting pressure on the Democratic elected officials, and there are a lot of them. There are 63 Black members of Congress now. Putting pressure on them to say, we need to see a racial equality agenda from you. This is what we need to see, or we're gonna run ads against you. We're gonna challenge you. We're gonna put, you may not be representing us nationally, but what can you do without the black vote? The Democrats cannot win nationally without black voters. It's also true that the black voters are about 38% of the Democratic primary electorate. So those 5 governors in those big blue states, California, Massachusetts, Illinois, New York, and Maryland, that want to be president, they all have to pay attention to what we say. So we're trying to raise an effort now to put pressure on the local level and the state level to pass laws that will counter what Trump is doing at the federal level. That's our project for the next 6 months.